What's up, guys? Some people seem to be confused by my last video. There were still some people that kind of wanted to say that, yeah, edge angle does have something to do with paper cutting. And like I said, there may be some circumstances, some extreme circumstances where that may be true. But just the mechanics of paper cutting alone pretty much dictate that edge angle has almost nothing to do with resistance or ease of paper cutting, all that kind of stuff. I want to give this for example. This is a traditional edge. You have your primary grind and your secondary grind down here, or your secondary edge bevel. I'm going to take this area and zoom up on it and say this is it. So this is a zoomed up view of this right here. Okay, when you're cutting paper, it is really only dependent on this very, very apex of the edge right here. The microscopic little point where the two planes of your edge meet in space. Okay, so you're sharpening at two different angles and they meet somewhere out there in space, and that's your apex. How clean that apex is what determines your paper cutting ability and how much resistance you have through that paper. Only the very most infinitesimal point of your apex matters when cutting paper. You could have an edge that is either this thick, so let's just say this is 30 degrees, or you could have an edge that is that thick, and let's just call that 60 degrees. As long as that apex is still sharp, and it can be just as sharp as this 30 degree apex, as long as it is as sharp as that 30 degree edge, you will feel pretty much no difference when cutting paper. Cutting paper has to do with sharpness and not edge geometry. Resistance when cutting paper has not to do with edge geometry. It is edge sharpness. How cleanly those two planes of your apex meet in space will determine how cleanly you cut through paper and how much resistance there is. Okay, so I can tell, and you're going to have to take my word for this because there's no way I can translate it into video, but I can take this edge, which is like 28 degrees inclusive, roughly 30 maybe, and cut paper, and I feel no resistance because it's sharp. I can take this knife, an SE5, which is quite literally the thickest knife, period, I have. Thickest edge, thickest stock. I mean, you can even see just how thick that is. At the that is quite literally like 2 mil thick at the edge. Not quite, it's like 1.5 mil thick, something like that. Okay, this edge is very, very sharp, so I feel no resistance when cutting the paper. You will just have to trust me when I say I feel literally no more resistance than when cutting with this knife. And this has over double the edge angle that the Sebenza has. There is quite literally no resistance whatsoever. I have a small bit of damage up here, and that's what's catching. But cutting paper really is not dependent on edge angle. Just the mechanics of cutting paper dictate that you have no resistance based on edge angle. When you're cutting paper, you see how it folds away from the edge? It's not wedging like a normal material will, where your edge goes into it and it wedges in, and the material has nowhere to go. Paper immediately tears away like that, and it has no drag on your edge. You could have an edge that's 65, 70, I would say probably 80 degrees and still feel no drag or no appreciable drag if your edge is sharp, if the apex still meets cleanly in space. I mean, you guys should just be able to see how effortless it is to cut this. Of course, you can't feel it, but I mean, there's no ripping, there's no tearing, It's just clean slicing. And that is because paper cutting has nothing to do with edge geometry. I mean, you can even hear it. It's not struggling. There's no resistance. There's really no difference in feel between these two knives, even though this is double what this edge angle is. It all has to do with how cleanly your edge meets in space. So you're sharpening those two planes, they finally meet in space, and how cleanly this is done is what affects paper cutting. Now you can have an apex at 30 degrees that isn't clean, and you're going to have tons of drag through paper. That is just due to edge sharpness and not edge geometry. Like I just showed you, you can have a knife that is insanely thick and you can still glide through paper like it's a Mora, like it's super thin. It just doesn't matter. Edge angle doesn't matter when cutting paper. I'm not talking about push cutting a stack of phone book paper like that, how people do show cutting performance. That's totally different. I'm talking about slicing paper. Edge angle has nothing to do with it. So, also something somebody said was that you can always get an edge that's 30 degrees sharper than an edge that's 60 degrees, and that's just not true. How clean your apex is has not much to do with the angle of your edge. I can meet an edge at 60 degrees just as clean as I can with an edge at 30 degrees. And I've actually shown a Strider SMF whittling hair at nearly 50 degrees. So, again, it doesn't really matter. I know this is probably a hard concept for some people to absorb because you've always heard thick angles are going to increase resistance. And that's true in most materials, but just the way paper is cut, paper isn't substantial enough to give you resistance, especially not phone book paper. It doesn't have enough mass and enough drag to give resistance with a thicker cutting edge. It will give you plenty of resistance with a dirty cutting edge, but thick, it doesn't really care. It will just go right through it like it's not there. So yeah, I mean, I'm holding the paper way back here. If there was tons of drag, I wouldn't be able to do that. So anyway, hope this clears that up. Not trying to argue, just trying to prove a point. Some people seemed kind of confused about it, or maybe I wasn't too clear in my first video. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.